Hi guys, I hope you are all doing fabulously today. Today I'm happy to share with you that we're going to embark on an epic journey, the likes of which we have never seen before. And I am going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about how we become NI dominants. This kind of story could be told about any dominant function type. And I have done some work on the other functions, as you know, linking them back to fantasies. But so far, only my work on NI dominance has allowed me to come to a fairly complete narrative of how one becomes an NI dominance, how it is, that we explain that some people become NI dominants and other people don't become NI dominants. Okay? So it's going to be a tricky journey, a long journey, and might require a couple of videos. But I hope that you will stick around, because whether you agree with this story or not, whether you make this story your own or not, as you will see, there will be plenty to discuss. And even what you don't agree with might stimulate you to reflect on ways that you would make sense of this process, whereby some people become NI dominants, some people become INFJs, some people become INTJs. So before we dive into this story of origins, just to remind you that I have a Patreon page where you can support me. You can donate to me either on a monthly basis or on a yearly basis. It's not expensive at all. It's only a few dollars a month, a few euros a month or a year. You help me massively. You help keep this channel going. These are not easy times, and I could not do this without you. And also, let's not forget that you get access to some really cool perks. Access to our Discord community. Come hang out with us on Discord. I'm there pretty much every day, as well as the whole library of deep dives. That's very popular with Patreon supporters. These long format videos that are released exclusively for patrons every 2-3 weeks on a topic of their choice. So it's a really good community. I hope you join. And now that that's been said, let's move on. The link to my Patreon is directly below, by the way, in the first link in the description box. Okay, so the origin story of how one becomes an NI dominant. So first things first, a few points. A lot of what I'm going to share with you has already been mentioned in different places and in bits and pieces, fragments here, fragments there. So do not be surprised if you get the sense that some of what I say here is not new as such. There are some new aspects which I'm excited to share with you, but there's also some aspects that have been sort of reorganized and arranged together so as to form a coherent story, and that in itself was a difficult creative act. Okay. The second aspect that will also become quite obvious is that of my original proposition, that type is the result of a combination of genetics and nurture. All right, nature and nurture contributes to someone being of a certain type. I still believe this, but I do believe, I have come to the conviction actually, that nurture is much more important, and that 80% of the work is done by nurture and 20% is done by nature. Another way of putting it is that what type we become is very directly influenced by our nurture, especially in the first year and a half of life, and it only indirectly influenced by our nature, and especially by our genes, by our genetic endowments, what we inherit. Okay. So one thing that I should mention last point is that psychologists nowadays are, and not just psychologists, neuroscientists, many other experts and researchers know that in the psychology of a person, intrauterine life inside a womb before birth is, even though it's still underexplored, it's not easy to explore. we know that it is actually very influential, way more influential on the formation of the child psychology and the adult psychology than we used to think. What happens inside the womb is formative, and we have to take it into account, and I will take it into account, okay? So how a person becomes an NI dominant. By age 1, that's done, they are NI dominant. How does that happen? So you have to imagine that the child is in the womb and is living in a world that is like paradise. All its needs are met immediately. It's very comfortable. The amniotic fluid is soft and reassuring and comfortable. It's the life they're used to. And that applies to all children. We have to suppose that in the case of the NI child, there's two things. First of all, their temperament as a child is in fact going to turn out upon birth and afterwards as a little more sensitive and a little bit more reactive to stimuli than your average child. So a temperament that's more sensitive, a temperament that's more brittle in a way and reactive, okay? Not all children are like that, but let's assume that is the case for the NI dominant. Let's also assume that in the womb, the child has a very, very, very close bond with the mother. Their unconsciouses are blended. They will remain largely blended upon birth and until the first 3 months of life. And again, this is true of all children or fetuses inside the womb, but we really have to assume that the bond between the NI child and the mother is particularly strong, extremely strong, that if you like, the boundary between the mother, who is at that point completely assimilated to the womb, there's an undifferentiation between the mother and the womb. The boundary between the child, the yet to become a child, and the mother womb is extremely porous, extremely porous. It's meant to be porous, but the porosity in the case of the NI baby is just out of proportion porous, okay? And that contributes to an extremely close bond and an extremely pronounced sense that the womb is paradise, that the womb is the universe of safety, of needs met, of everything sort of making sense, even though of course the baby at that point doesn't put it that way. There is just a sense of perfect oneness in there, okay? Very pronounced in the case of the NI dominant, the soon to become NI dominant. This is important because at some point something's going to happen which is called birth, and more specifically the trauma of birth, okay? Now the trauma of birth is experienced by all children, we know this, but for most children it is a trauma that, so to speak, they get over. It is a trauma that activates anxiety. Anxiety not just as something pathological, but also as something absolutely crucial. Signal anxiety helps us to have our mechanisms of defense ready in case that they need to be ready if we're in danger. But also the birth of what's originally called diffusion anxiety, dissociation anxiety, and later separation anxiety as the child develops more of a sense of object permanence. Now, the trauma of birth is going to be experienced by the NI dominant in a very specific way. Of course, at that point, they're not NI dominant yet, but it's part of the story. So in the next video, we're going to talk about this trauma of birth, seen from the point of view of the experience of the soon-to-become NI child, and we'll also be looking at what happens afterwards. Okay, guys, so I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Please let me know in the comments if you thought that was a compelling narrative. Don't forget also about my 2 books about the INFJ personality. That's kind of what put me on the map. The Ecstatic Soul, which is all about the inner life of the INFJ, the mind of the INFJ, the values, the thinking. And then the Infinite Soul, its sequel, which is all about the INFJ in the external world, in the outside world, how to find meaning, purpose, and value in a world that we often find hostile. The 2 books are linked below. If you want a deep understanding of this type, you need to read them. And wait until next year when my NI book will be released. Okay, guys, thank you for your attention and see you tomorrow.